think one of the hardest parts about therapy is that when you need it the most, you often don't know what good therapy is supposed to look like. You walk into it vulnerable, confused, hurting, and because of that, it's really easy to assume the therapist is automatically the authority. That if something feels off, maybe it's just you. But I don't think that's true. I think therapists are people just like you and me. Some are incredible at what they do, and some are mediocre. And some can actively make things worse. And I wish more people knew that you are allowed to be selective. You are allowed to leave. You are allowed to fire a therapist. Because finding a therapist is not about finding someone with a degree. It's about finding someone who can actually see you. And I think that's an important distinction. A good therapist is not someone who tells you who you are. They help you see yourself more clearly. They are more mirror than director. And I think that's what separates the really good ones from the not so good ones. The bad therapists, or at least the ones that aren't a good fit. They often feel too certain. They're too quick to label, too eager to advise, too focused on fixing. Sometimes they talk too much. My last therapist, I knew more about her life than she knew about mine. Sometimes it feels like they're trying to fit your life into a framework they already understand. And how frustrating it can be to not be fully understood. They're not really getting curious about you. And when that happens, you can leave sessions feeling strangely unseen. Even if they said technically correct things, but the good therapists, the really good ones, create space. They listen carefully. They reflect things back in a way that helps you discover something. They don't rush to conclusions. And oddly enough, they often say less. Not because they aren't engaged, but because they understand the insight lands deeper when it emerges from within you. A good therapist helps you hear yourself. That's what it feels like. And I think people are often surprised by how much therapy in the beginning is just talking, especially intake calls. Those first consultations are usually less intense than people expect. You're often talking about logistics first, what brings you in, what you're struggling with, what kind of therapy they practice. And honestly, I think those calls are less about impressing the therapist and more about noticing how your body feels while talking to them. Do you feel rushed, judged, managed, or do you feel safe enough to unfold a little? And then there's the first real session, which can feel awkward, vulnerable, sometimes anticlimactic. Honestly, you're usually giving context, telling your story, trying to explain years of your life to a stranger in under an hour. And a lot of people walk away from the first session thinking, I don't know if that helped. But I don't think the first session is supposed to solve you. I think it's more about resonance. Did this person feel emotionally attuned? Did they seem genuinely curious? Did they leave room for complexity? Do you feel more connected to yourself by the end or less? And one thing I've learned is that discomfort alone does not mean the therapist is bad. Good therapy can absolutely be uncomfortable. Sometimes you leave feeling emotionally exposed, but there's a difference between therapeutic discomfort and relational misattunement. One feels challenging but grounded. The other feels subtly wrong. And I think we have to trust ourselves enough to notice the difference, especially if we come from environments where we learn to override our instincts. I also think people need to know you don't owe a therapist permanence. You can outgrow them. You can realize they're not the right fit. You can appreciate what they helped you with and still move on. And that's healthy. Because therapy is deeply relational, and not every therapist will be right for every person. I think about it almost like trying on glasses. Some therapists help sharpen your vision, others distort it. And sometimes the only way you realize that is by experiencing multiple perspectives. I also think there's a misconception that therapists are supposed to constantly give advice. Personally, I don't think the best therapists overdirect because advice can create dependency. It can subtly communicate, I know your inner world better than you do. And I think healing often comes from reclaiming trust in yourself, not outsourcing it completely. So the best therapists, in my experience, don't hand you an identity. They help you remove the noise around the one you already have. They notice patterns, they ask questions, they reflect contradictions, and slowly you begin hearing yourself more honestly. That's the real gift. Not becoming someone new, but becoming harder to abandon, harder to manipulate, harder to disconnect from yourself. And maybe that's why finding the right therapist matters so much. Because the right one doesn't become your voice. They help you find your own.